If you can't be in the field chasing gun dogs, the next best thing is talking about it.
Join Wade and Thomas as we discover the people, the places, and the birds, and of course, the gun dogs that make upland hunting our passion.
This is the Setter Tales Podcast.
You're live.
Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Setter Tales Podcast. As you can see, we are live tonight.
It's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, we have a good one. So if you are listening and watching, feel free to shoot us a message on whatever platform you're using and with some live questions with our guest. We'll introduce him here in a second. But we want to thank our sponsors, Kinetic Dog Food and Highland Hideaway Hunting in Riverside, Iowa. We have, it's getting closer. We're getting halfway through the summer. We're getting to the 4th of July here, and we are having the Heroes Hunt, so there are some spots available for that still.
There are, yeah. We're just about half full right now. So if you're a current or retired law enforcement officer, no matter where you are, if you want to travel to Riverside, Iowa to Highland Hunting and take place for the Heroes Hunt, get involved with that. You can find more information about it at linpf.org. There's a place you can sign up online and get additional information, and it's going to be a great event. It's going to be an all-day event with hunting in the field with pheasants, as well as some handgun courses, competitive handgun courses, and so should be a fun time.
Big bags tournament, great food. It's going to be a good time. This is my third year at this, and it's always the kind of the first hunt of the season for me, and it's pretty much most exciting. So
yeah, we're we're going to cap it at 50, and so if you're interested, get in, get registered, and it's kind of first come first serve kind of thing. So
yeah, it was full last year. We had quite a few states represented, and it's a good safe time, and it's just we have a blast, so to speak. But we have a really cool guest tonight. We have Tyler Sladen from New Mexico, and Tyler has he does some pretty unique things down there. He's got some English setters, and he's got some Yag Terriers and some Hawks. So we're going to bring Tyler in and welcome him. And like I said, if you have any questions for him, let us know. We'll flash it on the screen for us or read it through and for him to answer. And so, Tyler, welcome to the show.
How's it going, guys?
Doing good. So, we kind of talked before the show, but kind of give us the rundown from, I know you were on the East Coast, and then now you're in New Mexico, and you're doing some really cool things out there.
Yeah, so I grew up on the East Coast, joined the Army. The Army sent me a little bit of everywhere, and then when I got out, I moved to Missouri, became a falconer, got into gun dogs, and then once I realized how much better it was the more west you go, I moved west and haven't looked back since, really. I've been out here 6 years now, chasing quail out here.
Yeah, and your quail season kind of goes a little different than what our seasons. We start mid to late October and we go into January, but you guys can hunt from. You guys are pretty well wide open from like September till like February, or do I have that wrong?
So September, our mountain grouse open. We have prairie chickens. You can't hunt them here. So you can go hunt blue grouse up in the mountains from September 1st. And that overlaps for like 2 weeks with quail, but quail doesn't open until November 15th. However, our falconry season for quail is September 1st to March 1st. So it's just gun hunting is shorter.
So do you do a little bit of both, or with the gun hunting, or do you just prefer having that hawk with you?
I do a lot of both. The hawk, he only flies once a day, so I only get like a couple hours out of him. But if I have to pick between the two, I'm gonna go fly my bird. But on days where I can hunt all day, I'll hunt with a gun all day, and then 3 o'clock rolls around, I'll go get the hawk out and hawk till dark.
So you do it a little different than some, and from what I've seen on videos, and I met a mutual friend of yours is with Sean Derrick. So and you kind of filled me in on. But you guys you got your setters or your pointing dogs out there, and then you use the Yag Terriers to go in and flush the bird, and then the hawk takes over.
Yep. Mouse and Naja will flush if you tell them to, and especially when quail get into thick stuff, or even if it's just grass, it's just kind of fun and flashy to kind of leave a dog back on point and then send a flushing dog in. I've got a cocker too, but I use the Yags the same way I would use a cocker.
Now that's something. The cockers, they're kind of been on my bucket list to have that, but now that I see that everybody's using these little Yag Terriers, I just think them as ferocious little, you know, just they'll kill and fight anything, and they're a small dog with a big heart, and they're just. But I've been around a few that are really nice, and even Sean's that you can sit there, they sit on your lap and pet you, but I mean you don't see that very often. Is that something that you just tried and it was successful, or did somebody like pass that down to you, or?
There's a lot of variation in Yag Terrier lines. There's a lot of Eastern European trial lines that are kind of the demon dogs that everybody knows about, but then there's dogs from that same part of the world that are bred to have a solid mind. And once I got my hands on some solid-minded dogs, I kind of haven't looked back. I've messed with Yags that are pretty hard and pretty driven, and they're capable of being trained to do the same things. They just don't. They don't always have that personality and that intelligence that dogs like the stuff Sean has and the stuff that I like to work with. Really just depends what you want to work with. And then there's a lot of the bigger Yags that are used for hog hunting, and they're just as solid minded. They're just bigger, and they fill a different niche. I like to dig when there's game to dig to, and I like to have a flushing dog when I need one, and so I like a well-rounded little smart terrier.
Yeah.
I use them for work too, so that helps me there.
Yeah. So explain a little bit about what you do for work.
So I own and operate a nuisance wildlife business. So everything from raccoons in people's chimneys to pigeons at hospitals to cell phone towers and moles and ground dogs and all the animals that kind of come between. I don't really do bugs, so I mostly mess with nuisance mammals and birds. So that's what
No
I do
snakes.
for. I will do snakes. I don't use dogs or traps or anything for that. Like, we get a lot of rattlesnake calls here coming up soon, and I just go and pick them up and relocate them out to the desert. The cool thing about rattlesnakes is when someone calls and has one on their front porch, you can show up a few hours later and it's still sitting there. They're not very active during the day.
Okay. Any questions?
Well, yeah, I was just.
I'm doing all the talking.
That's all right. It's kind of fascinating that you can tie together. I guess being able to tie the work with the hunting side aspect of it is what I see to be pretty cool with the terriers and that kind of thing. So basically, sounds like with the falcon, you're pretty much going after quail. Would that be kind of your main pursuit? I know there are a lot of different species out there, but kind of walk us through. You get the bird out, you get him out, and then how do you use it, and what's the setup for finding quail?
So typically I like to run 2 pointing dogs at a time and then run a flushing dog when I'm flying a bird. That's about all I can kind of handle without having too many irons in the fire. So the setters will go out, they'll find birds, they'll eat up the country, and then when the Garmin goes off and tells me where I need to go, I'll walk over there. My goshawk will be on my glove. Dogs will be on point. I'll send a flushing dog in. And then the quail will get up, and then the hawk will get into like a drag race with the quail, and most times try to pull them out of the air, and then sometimes they need a reflush, and that's where the terriers really come in handy. A lot of times they'll put into thick cactus, they'll put into really sharp cat claw or desert thorn, and just stuff I don't really want to dig through, and neither does the bird or a pointing dog that can smell the bird from outside the bush. They don't need to go in there. So the flushing dogs really come in handy there.
So when I've seen all your Instagram posts and everything, and you got the dogs hanging out in the yard and the hawks just hanging out with them, and you know what, what is the kind of the training aspect you go through there, as far as those dogs are bird driven, and do they, how do you keep the dogs from wanting to get after that hawk all the time?
So dogs are pretty good and read body language more than most people will talk about. So a lot of times, like even a puppy can read the body language difference in a hawk that's going to stand its ground and raise its hackles and open its wings and present itself in a way that it's not prey. Whereas a quail or a pheasant's going to haul ass and run or fly away and act like prey. Not to mention both smell completely different. So the same way you would get your dog to leave a raven or a Tweety bird alone, just tell them no bird, leave it. Is the same kind of concept with having around hawks. Some dogs struggle with it more than others, but for the most part, I've never really come into too much of an issue. Even flying over dogs that have never seen a hawk up close in their life, usually a quick brief introduction, and they're like, I want nothing to do with that. Leave it alone. So I try to get my dogs used to it in the yard, but once you're out hunting, it's a completely different scenario too, because now the dogs know they're hunting, and then quail are flying and there's quail ripping everywhere, and the hawk grabs a quail, and sometimes the dogs will run in and then they're like, oh no, this quail has a hawk attached, and they'll leave it, and they know it's a mistake. You can see it in their face. They're like, I shouldn't be this close to the bird. And then every now and then you'll get a hawk that kind of reinforces it in their own way. I don't really like when they do that, but there's not really much you can do. You can't throw an e-collar or a check cord on a hawk in that regard and tell them no. You're kind of left with the behavior. You can kind of shape it and kind of avoid situations by managing the dogs differently, but you're not going to get the hawk to let dogs any closer than it wants.
Yeah, from some of the videos I've seen, even with guys with the beagles, that they'll come up there, and that hawk usually announces its presence and puts its wings out, and it's like they put on the brakes. They just like, okay, yeah, I know, I got to stay back.
Yeah, you'll see like when my hawk's on the ground eating and his wings are up and tight on his back, the dogs are like, cool, I'm free to do what I want. But then when the hawk starts jumping around or flapping, that all of a sudden there's like a 15-foot circle around that hawk that none of my dogs want anything to do with, because they realize he's not feeding, he's not focused on something that distracts him from them anymore. And they're like, I could be on the menu next. I'm gonna go find most of my dogs they'll just take off and go find more birds. Some of my dogs will lay down and kind of observe from like 15 feet away, because they know hawks are really picky on when they eat. So they'll flick like pieces of meat, they'll flick guts. They're not going to eat that. So the dogs have learned over the years, as soon as that hawk's done eating, he's going to hop to the glove, and I'm going to run in and grab all these quail guts and pieces that the hawk didn't want to eat. It's a dog. They'll eat almost anything. So.
Mm-hmm. So when you start with a hawk, do you get them as a chick, correct?
So I raise what you would call an imprint. So that's when you hand raise a baby bird. When falconers trap birds, that's called a passage bird. That's the more normal way. With goshawks, since they're so neurotic and spooky at times, it helps to hand raise them, especially if you want them to tolerate a pile of dogs and new scenarios and stuff like that, and hot weather. They're a cold weather bird, so getting them to tolerate hot weather alone, you're asking them to do something that goes against what they're made to do already.
So what was that process like? How do you obviously have to know where there's a nest or what the timing? Kind of walk us through that, Tyler, if you would.
Okay, so there's that to me is like a rite of passage. You spend all spring looking for nests, playing calls, walking around the mountains, looking lost. You'll locate a few nests, and then when you can kind of guess based on how the bird sits up on the nest what age the chicks are. when they're on eggs, the mother's going to be down low. You're not going to see much of her. She's not going to get off, not even to yell at you most of the time. But once they've hatched, she'll be up on the nest bowl more so that she's not overheating them. Ideally, you want to pull a goshawk 10 to 15 days old. And then at that time, you would climb the nest, pull your baby, and then you would raise a bird from there. By about day 40 to 45, they're already flying, doing stuff. So the process is rapid, and it's every day is monumentally different than the day before. They mature incredibly fast, and then from there, you're pretty much simulating hunts, and then as the hunting season opens, then you're actually hunting, and then the next 6 months, you're pretty much wed to that bird for its first season of hunting, and then come summer or come into season, you feed the bird up, you put it in a chamber and let it grow new feathers, and you start all over again come the next fall. The bird's first year, though, you start a lot earlier than their second year because you go from raising a bird straight into hunting. So you're out there early September, late August. It's hot, it's miserable. Whereas in the second year, you can wait till Halloween, you can wait till November to pull the bird out of the chamber and go hunting. So if you can get through the first year, every year after that's incredible. But that first year is a labor of love.
So you pretty much, even if you had a young one or you got an older one, you're pretty much using food and positive reinforcement so that bird does return, correct?
Yeah, exactly. It's that is you've only got pretty much pattern and food. That's your only ways to train a bird of prey. I guess you could rope in confidence in there. So you have confidence you can use where you build confidence on the bird. You can pattern train them, but most of it is all revolving around food. So, for example, like a pattern train would be in the beginning, the bird only sees launched pheasant when it's on my glove. I would never launch a pheasant when the bird's sitting behind me in a tree or sitting on the ground. So eventually, after a lot of repetitions of that, it learns that, hey, when I ride around on this hairless ape's hand, birds just appear, and there's always a dog right near that bird, and that clicks with them. And then as the season progresses, my last goshawk I had for a few seasons, when he saw a dog go on point, he would leave me. He would fly straight to the dog and land on the nearest bush and wait for me to come flush. And then when the quail got up, he would take off after the quail. He would stay on the glove and stand up real high and get real excited. And he knew the dog was on point oftentimes before the people that I had in the field with me did. And once you get to that point, it's incredible. It's unbeatable, but it takes a lot of repetition to get there.
I'm sure they probably, if you're I mean, I'm sure they're just like anything else, and even with like a flushing dog with a pointing dog, they hear that beeper collar or whatever. He may hear that Garmin beep or something, and or a collar, and he might just like, oh yeah, we got something going on here.
Yeah, exactly. And then like when you're flying dogs over beagles, when they hear the beagles bark, they learn the different barks, and they can decipher the bark sometimes better than some handlers can. And that in itself is incredible to see. I started with squirrel dogs and flying over squirrel dogs. And as soon as the dog opened up on a track that they knew was an actual squirrel, the bird would leave me and follow those dogs through the woods. And that's how I got into falconry. That's what I saw first, and that's what got me in. And then from there, I saw bird dogs and hawks being flown over bird dogs, and I took a hard left when I saw that. I haven't looked back since on that regard.
Yeah, I grew up with the squirrel dogs myself, and it always seemed like if the dogs had a squirrel and they get to bouncing around the tree, it would always see if a hawk flew over, they either went for the hole or they just bellied up to the tree and didn't move, and you could actually get an ethical shot on them. And so I can kind of see how that would be a good advantage to having a hawk. So I mean, obviously you had to really do your homework on this, and I probably do want to say that to our viewers, just don't go climb a tree and steal a baby hawk. You probably have to have a special permit and a license to be able to do that.
Yeah, so you're federally permitted. Everything's federally regulated. Each state has its own set of regulations. And then even for me as a licensed falconer to go pull a goshawk, I have to enter in just like a big game draw for an elk tag. You have to draw a goshawk tag here, and they only issue 6, which sounds like a lot, but I mean, there's the whole country's putting in for goshawk tags here, and it's heavily regulated. Residents get preference, obviously, but yeah, I can't just leave my house right now and go get a goshawk. I have to have a tag, and that's after already being permitted.
But it sounds like someone from out of state can come in and get a bird there and then take them back to
Yeah,
Iowa or wherever they want to do. Want to
yeah,
pick those
absolutely.
birds.
So almost all the states are pretty reciprocal. Like if you have an Iowa falconry license, you can come here and pull a bird here. You'll have to pay for a hunting license here before you pull a bird here, even if you're not hunting here, which is, it sounds weird, but that's just how it is. I mean, you're taking a resource from the state and going back to your state. So that's why they do that. But yeah, you would have to draw a tag if you wanted to come here. And they're going to verify that you're licensed in your state and all that too.
And so did you, obviously you probably had a mentor for that to show you how all that was done, or?
Yeah, that's the cool thing about falconry is, yes, there's books and there's YouTube, but it's what you can learn from both is very limited in regards to, or in comparison to, learning from other falconers. When I was in Missouri, there's a very well respected falconer there, Mike McDermott, who is a legend in his own regard in flying goshawks, Cooper's hawks, and sharpshins. And that's what that was my goal the whole time with falconry, is I wanted to fly a goshawk over a bird dog on pheasant someday. And I linked up with him, and he showed me his way of doing it. And I initially used to fly over his dogs before getting my own bird dogs. And at the time he had Vizslas, and so I went out and bought a Vizsla from a kennel in Missouri, and that was my first bird dog that I really caught a lot of quail over. I had a setter before that, but I really didn't know what I was doing. I was putting the cart before the horse. I had the bird to catch the birds, so I went out and got a setter, and it was a lot more dog than I had needed for hunting abandoned farms in Missouri. But through that, I linked up with the guy that bred the Vizsla that I have, and he helped me train the setter and got me a trained Vizsla as well. And we've been rocking it ever since.
Yeah, speaking like with the training with a dog, you probably just wouldn't want somebody with a random dog just to show up and hunt over your hawk, I would assume, correct?
No, absolutely not. I wouldn't fly over someone's dog that's not broke, or someone that didn't have a good handle on their dog. And I've flown over a lot of other people's dogs, just to kind of show them that, like, hey, you don't have to start over with the dog if you want to get into falconry. And then other times, like, I would go down to Arizona before I knew a lot about Mearns quail and hunt with Pat Flanagan, and we would fly Mearns quail with his guide string with my birds, but he had broke guide dogs. So
Yeah, that I don't know. I just have this crazy fear that my dogs would just go blowing in and grab the hawk and not think about it. But
I've only ever had 2 close calls flying over strange people's dogs, and even then, like, a lot of times, like, you'll see the dog go for a retrieve or something, and I mean, it's the handlers at that point trying to whoa the dog or stop the dog, and you can see the dog's eyes like widen, like, this isn't a pheasant, or this isn't a duck, like this is some weird kind of chicken, like, what's going on here? But yeah, if you're worried about it, I wouldn't do it. But if you're confident in being able to stop the dog, I would.
well, yeah, I could. My dogs are just not. They're used to catching 35-pound coon in the CRP patch once in a while.
Yeah.
You mentioned a goshawk, a Cooper's hawk, and I'm familiar with those because we have one that's in our area that I see all the time. And then what was the other that you said that you
Sharpshin. So
okay.
it's basically a mini Cooper's hawk. They're
Okay.
the next size down in that tree of birds.
Now, do those birds hunt differently, or do they all kind of do their job
All,
the same way?
all 3 hunt the same way. They just hunt different things. Like a sharpshin's going to mostly hunt like little woodpeckers and tiny birds, whereas like a Cooper's hawk's going to start to get into the bigger birds like collared doves and even small ducks. And then goshawks can a wild goshawk can pull a racing pigeon out of the sky if it wants to. It can catch grouse, and a lot of the ones that live in the forest exist on grouse. So, um, just different prey items for each one. But all three of those are what they would call an accipiter.
And I've heard of people using red tails as well.
So that's what you start with.
Okay.
You can catch pheasant with them. It's like a tall order, and most of the time they're catching them. The red tail already has the telephone pole of an advantage or a tree, and then the pheasant's barely clearing the grass, and they're kind of intercepting them. But most people flying red tails are catching squirrels and cottontails, and sometimes jackrabbits. But that's primarily what those guys are doing, and that's how almost all of the country gets started in falconry, is with a wild red tail. So when I got started, I had a red tail that I flew on squirrels because I lived in Missouri, and I would catch squirrels over. I had dachshunds and I had terriers that I would fly over.
Now,
I never got into the feist or anything, but
how many seasons, Tyler, do you normally get out of a bird? Is there a certain length of time that you expect that bird to be productive, and then what do you do once those birds get aged?
It's so hard to answer. If you can get a bird to live 30 years, you've done an incredible job, but there's so much risk involved with hunting a bird for 30 years. Like I had a bird, my last goshawk I had for 4 years before he died of a bacterial infection. It's just, you got to remember that they only weigh 2 pounds, and that's a big one. Most are under a pound or a pound and a half. And so when stuff goes wrong, it goes wrong really fast. I've had birds electrocuted. I've had birds killed by lead poison. I've had birds die of West Nile. There's just so much out there that can kill a bird that's not even a predator. And then there's birds that get killed by other birds. It's one thing I like about a goshawk is I'm not really too worried about a red tail or any other birds messing with my bird. But if I was to fly a Cooper's hawk, I'm now worried about red tails eating my bird. When I flew kestrels, I was always terrified a Cooper's hawk was going to smoke my kestrel midway to a kill. That's just how it works. It's a bird eat bird world. So as far as an average, I'd say any bird that makes it through its first season with a falconer, most time you'll see them 4 to 7 years, probably on average. And I don't really have any data to really base this average on. This is just what I've seen, but they could hit a fence tomorrow chasing a quail, and that's it. It's over. So it sucks to lose a bird, but it's also kind of part of it. Unfortunately, you can't be a falconer very long without experiencing some kind of loss.
So you say you chamber them, so you just put them in, they have to molt. A bird has to molt every year. So
correct. So we let them.
You just
sorry.
Leave them be and let them go through that process.
Yeah. So what we'll do is they've got a 10 by 10 chamber that has a few vertical barred windows, and you just give them food every day and fresh water, and kind of leave them be, and they'll grow new feathers. And then once their feathers are done growing, it's usually around September, October time frame, you pull them out, start pulling their weight down, and then you get back to hunting. It's that first year when they don't have that molt that they go from being a baby to killing. There's no downtime.
So you're feeding them just primarily raw meat, or do you do?
Yeah, so they'll eat like a third of a cottontail a day, or it just depends on what bird. So for me, a male goshawk would probably eat a third of a cottontail every day, or half a quail every day. I don't want to get them like obese. I just want them to have a good amount to be at a weight where they're not really hungry, but they're also not, and they're also able to grow strong new feathers in. Sometimes if you get them too high in weight, they get nervous and stressed out, and that's the opposite of what you want when you're trying to grow nice new feathers that you're going to beat the heck out of for a year.
So you probably have to condition these just like you would your dogs for hunting season. How do you go through that? Can you just take their hood off and let them go fly around? Will they do that, or?
No, so they won't do that. That's more of a falcon thing. But even then, there's intent behind their flying around. Like they might people with falcons, they'll fly them to a drone to exercise them. So they're flying 1,000 feet up, grabbing a lure and coming down and eating. Where so for people with goshawks or red tails, I'll take a quail and cut it into like skittle sized pieces of meat, like 100 of them, and I'll climb a step ladder and then I'll call the bird to my fist and I'll flick a piece of meat onto the ground, and he'll have to fly up and down to the me on top of a 6 foot step ladder 100 times every night for his food, and that really puts him into condition. Doesn't take super long to get him back into shape. Usually like 1 to 2 weeks, and then once you start hunting, they condition a lot faster. But if on a day I couldn't hunt, if I want to keep my bird conditioned, that's what I would do. You'll find me standing on the hood of my truck or on my tailgate, making my bird jump up and down for food.
We do have a question.
Yeah, Tim writes, ask him if he's ever done any car hawking.
So Tim was a buddy of mine from St. Louis. We used to go car hawking with a Kestrel when I lived in the city in St. Louis, and Tim would come home from work and he's like, let's go car hawking. Tim's not even a falconer, and he would drive me around and we'd find starlings, roll down the window and toss a bird out the window on some starlings. And it was a blast because it was like a summertime thing. We'd be out there like right now. And the cool thing was it doesn't get dark till 9 o'clock at night. So we would be out there till 9 o'clock at night catching starlings in like the hood of St. Louis.
That is pretty. You're not shooting a gun, so is it really considered hunting?
No, and then starlings aren't a game species, so you're not pursuing
Yeah,
game out the window
I'm
either.
sure they're a nuisance bird, so I'm sure the government appreciates every one of those that you.
I only ever got pulled over one time, and the cop told me to buckle my seatbelt. That was it. So he
Nobody's
didn't
gonna
really
mess with a guy with a hawk on his arm.
No, and if you ran into locals, they'd call it white people stuff. They're like, that's the most white people stuff I've ever seen. But we had a
No,
blast.
that is really interesting.
Now, so the day-to-day, care of one, like, Thomas and I both have hunting dogs, so we know what goes into the day-to-day, just taking care of them when you're not hunting them. So I'm sure there's a routine as well for your birds. And is there a certain time you feed them, and what's the routine like to take care of a bird of this type?
So usually you try to feed them on a bird that I fly. So when I speak about falconry, I guess I'm just going to speak about what I'm currently working with. Falconry is incredibly diverse. So on a bird that I fly, I try to fly on a 22-hour window. So if I want to hunt tomorrow at 5, if I want to be done tomorrow at 5 o'clock, I'm going to feed today at 3, so that my bird is like ready to really go tomorrow at 3. I like them to have no food in their system essentially, but have fed within 22 hours of when I'm hunting. And then I'll give them a snack in the morning, like just to keep their blood sugar up. But other than that, like they haven't had a meal. Like it would be the equivalent of you eating like an energy drink and a donut to them. So in the morning, I'll weigh them, give them like 20 grams of quail, and then I'll go to work, come home at 3, weigh them, load them in the box, and then drive out to where I'm going to go hunt that day. And then I'll hunt from like 3:30 till dark. So whether it's 5 or 6 o'clock, it depends on what part of the winter, but that's usually the goal.
Now, I'm assuming this question may come up, but I'm going to ask it. But have you ever just had one just like, I'm out of here, and you're hunting and it just flies away? Or
in the years I've been a falconer, I've, knock on wood, never had a bird just leave. There's usually extenuating circumstances if they do. Like I've had my bird catch a quail, and then here comes Edgar on his ATV that just saw it all happen, and he rolls up on me and he's like, what are you doing? And my hawk isn't really accustomed to an ATV stopping 3 feet away and flies away with that quail. And then I just go find him. But they're not going to just like up and migrate to Venezuela on me. Falcons can cover a lot more ground than say a goshawk would when that same situation would happen, but I've never really had too much of that. If anything, it's like my bird carried a quail 800 yards from where it caught it, and it was just because like a coyote came in, a guy on an ATV, someone on a horse, just something spooked him. It's not that he's trying to get away from me; he's trying to get away from whatever he perceives as terrifying.
Now, do you run a GPS locator on him on the hawk?
Yeah, so he's got a GPS. You only got like 24 hours of GPS, but he has a GPS on his leg, and then he has on his other leg or on his tail another transmitter that's old school telemetry, and you have about 6 days of that. I've had to only go to that a few times in the last 6-7 years, but it's there if I need it. And you don't need it until you really need it, and so it's kind of good practice to always use it.
Yeah. One question was, what was the fastest speed you think your hawks have reached, like if they're diving down for prey?
So that's the whole stoop thing. That's more of a falcon thing. I've never really flown falcons in the hunting regard. I've used them for work, but not in the sense like what everyone perceives as a peregrine stooping. I have had my goshawk off the glove on a windy day hit 84 miles an hour behind a pheasant. So they're cooking. But I mean, that was my best bird I've ever flown in the best shape of his life on like the pheasant flushed and then cut downwind. And he just took that tailwind and rode it. And he pulled it out of the sky a couple hundred yards later, but yeah, he hit 84. That's the fastest I've ever seen. A more normal speed would probably be about 67 to 70 on quail. On rabbits, he'll go a lot slower because he doesn't need to go those speeds. You'll usually see like 35 to 45, but a rabbit's not gonna go 60 miles an hour. That's not what rabbits do.
So what I've seen on the videos, they kind of just get over top of them and just grab a hold of them. They don't really just, like, especially the smaller hawks, they just don't go diving in like you said, like a falcon would. They just kind of catch up with them and just weigh them down, don't they, normally?
So what goshawks will do is you'll have a quail flying or a pheasant or a grouse, and what goshawks try to do is they try to get right under it. This bird can't see them once they're here, and once they get into that pocket, they'll cut their tail and pitch straight up and grab them from underneath, and because they're in a blind spot. They know where that bird's blind spot is. Wow. So usually when you see him catch, you'll see him almost pretty much level, and then you'll see him dip under. And when you see him go up, that's usually when the catch is about to happen.
So if they I mean, obviously they'll probably have a miss once in a while. Do they keep pursuing, or do they come back, or?
It depends. There's so many variables on that. A lot of times with quail, they get so scared that they dump. Like even if a goshawk does that and they miss, like the quail's like, and then just drops into whatever's below it. Pheasant too. Pheasant would rather run until they had a heart attack than die in the air. And then a lot of times, then you just reflush them, and usually on a reflush, you're gonna catch them, and if you can find them.
And that's about all you can do then, right?
That's all you.
You know what? When that hawk's made a successful catch, you probably quit. You probably do you go out and get your limit with them, or do you just say that's enough? And
it depends. So if he does everything right, I'm gonna end on a good note. If I get a dog pointing, dog backing, dog goes in and flushes, and he pulls that off the rise, I'm done. Like it doesn't get better than that. I'm not gonna keep going. If I have people that haven't seen falconry and they want to see more, and that happened 5 minutes in, yeah, I'm gonna keep going. But if it's just me, I'm done. Like there's not like that is my goal every day when I go out. So if I hit that goal, I'm not gonna prove anything by doing that 2 more times, less like more poorly than the first time. You're not gaining anything. However, our falconry limits are different than a gun. So for me, my limit with a hawk is 3 quail no matter what, whereas guns 15. So when I'm making a new bird, I'll push a little bit more for higher numbers just to really drive home what we're doing. But an older bird, I just want right. I don't numbers no longer matter on an older bird to me.
Do you have multiple birds, or you usually just have the one bird that you're
I
working
used
with
to
at
have
a time?
I used to have multiple. Now I've learned that I'm a much better falconer when I'm a one bird guy. Because for me, I can fly my bird, get everything I want out of it, and then go take the dogs in a shotgun and relax. As much as I enjoy falconry when it goes right, when it goes wrong, it's the most hair pulling hobby I've ever had. Because when it goes wrong, it goes really wrong. And sometimes I just like take a peaceful walk with the dogs with a gun or a camera.
So what kind of things can go wrong that are kind of stressful?
You have a hawk that doesn't want to chase all the way through. You have a hawk that's scared of your buddy who's wearing some wonky color. Or it's too windy. It's a lot to ask of a hawk to hang on to your fist when the winds are 35 miles an hour. They're going to get grumpy. They're going to want to go sit in a tree. They don't, a wild hawk's not going to want to hunt in that all day long. So if I catch anything in those kind of winds, I'm done after one. I'm not it because you're holding a kite essentially on your hand, and if the winds are 35 with gusts of 50, like every time the bird's like trying not to blow away, but it can only do so much.
We do have another question.
This one's kind of a multi-parter. Catherine writes, do you specifically choose male versus female hawks? Do they now come from goshawk breeders? Do you pick a fledgling for specific traits, or is it a good guess?
So male versus female. What I'm hawking is small. Grouse and quail are relatively small when compared to, say, ducks or jackrabbits. So small things are typically faster. So I want a smaller bird. So male goshawks are two-thirds the size of a female goshawk. So say my male is 700 grams, his sister was probably 1,300. So I don't need a bigger bird. I don't need to compensate with a bigger bird. I enjoy the flights out of a male. They're more aerial. And then the other thing is kind of what I've observed in wild goshawks and wild birds. A wild male goshawk is feeding a female himself and 3 to 5 babies every year. Very subservient behavior just biologically. Whereas you have a female who, once she reaches sexual maturity, she has food brought to her. She is very demanding and grumpy. And I just don't like, I don't really like female goshawks when compared to males. I like all goshawks, but if I had to pick, I will fly males for as long as I'm alive. As far as wild versus captive bred, I love a wild North American goshawk. I think every falconer that wants to fly goshawks should fly one before they go buy one. It's kind of a rite of passage. As far as advantages, it's kind of hard to say if there is any. There's so many variables that go into raising a bird, and you're getting your birds at the same age, and you're going to honestly if you value your time, you're going to spend about the same amount of money as you would on a wild bird as you would from a captive bred breeder. However, I can't get a Russian goshawk out of a tree. I can't get a Finnish goshawk or a German goshawk. I can only get American goshawks. So like my bird is mostly Russian now. So it's still a goshawk, but it'll have different behaviors, and I'm curious to have that comparison. So that's why I went the captive bred this route. Mine came from a breeder in Indiana called Heartland Goshawks. As far as picking traits, no, all you're picking is male and female. I mean, when you know it's your bird, it's only like 5 days old. There's really nothing you could judge it on. It's like getting a thing of Play-Doh. It's now your time to mold it into the bird you want.
So when you're grabbing them out of a nest, are you just picking them by size? So you probably pick the smallest one, or I mean, I wouldn't even, besides color. Like I
No,
got a
so
pen full of pigeons. I don't know which ones are girls or which ones are the boys or anything.
So on hawks, their head shapes are different. So the males have a different head shape when you're looking down at it than a female would. The size can be all over the map because not every egg hatches on the same day. So an egg that hatched 3 days before the other egg, if that's a female, is going to be giant when compared to another female hatched 3 days later. And then a male that could have hatched in between those two is smaller than both of them. So you really you got to go off head shape and leg thickness. That's really all you got. And even then, you still make mistakes, but usually there's more males in a nest than females. It's usually like 3 to 1. So if you're aiming for a male, you've got pretty good odds, even if you're guessing. Whereas if you're aiming for a female, good luck. I hope you know what you're looking for.
And I'm guessing to get that bird out of that nest, you open yourself up to some punishment from the parent birds if they're in the area, correct?
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, they always are. I've got scars all the way through the tattoos on my back from adult goshawks. And then I had an adult Cooper's hawk split my ear in half one time. So yeah, you're opening. They don't like you up near their nest, that's for sure.
So you're what, 80 feet in the air, and it's trying to take your ear off?
Yeah, anywhere from, so Cooper's hawks here nest 20, 30 feet in the air, where goshawks are anywhere from 50 to 100, and then sharp shins are 80 to 100. So yeah.
So you can't be afraid of heights either.
No.
You gotta be a good climber.
I assume you'd want somebody with you to call 911 if you needed it, I guess. But
yeah, usually if there's multiple people pulling birds that day, the person climbing he's not paid, but usually he's given a few meals and nice gifts like artwork and stuff.
So
he's compensated.
So you're saying if Thomas and I want a bird, you'll go up in the nest and get our bird for us while we wait on the ground. Is that how it works? We'll buy you lunch though.
You'd have to do all the work and find the bird and all that. I don't mind climbing for anybody, but yeah, I enjoy climbing, especially for a bird. It's a cool experience.
Yeah, that would. I'm not much of a climber.
So
I can get down. It's the going up part.
So is there some specialized equipment that you use to climb that high, or that's specific to the bird activity that you're doing, or do you just climb a
tree?
So
if you're pulling a peregrine, you're rappelling in off a cliff because they're usually nesting in cliff faces. Whereas if you're pulling a goshawk, you can climb with spikes if they're in aspen or pine. I usually try to shoot a rope up over the branch above the nest and then climb with an ascender to the nest. When I pulled my last bird, the nest was out on a branch, so I had to unclip and go out on the branch. That was horrifying, and the birds left me completely alone the whole way up. As soon as I unclipped and went out on that branch, they unleashed hell on me. So that was kind of unexpected, but once you're already 80 feet in the air and now you're 10 feet out on a branch, you're not going to turn around now empty handed. So
the only parts that hurts is when you hit the ground, right?
Yeah. Well, it's not the fall. It's the sudden stop at the end.
Yeah, it's the stop. So,
wow, there's some dedication to what you're doing. Wow.
Yeah, I lost my audio. There, I'm back. But we always get through the show and I think we could talk to you for 2 hours about this, but whether it's with the Hawks or he does have English setters, so that's kind of another reason why we had him on the show. But give us like your favorite story from the field, whether it's with the dogs, with both dogs and the Hawks.
I've seen so much crazy stuff over the years. Probably one of my favorites, the guy who taught me to fly goshawks over bird dogs. He came out to visit when I had raised my last one, and it was one of the first few quail he had ever caught. So this wasn't normal. I mean, he had caught a handful, but in the beginning, a lot of times they catch them on the ground while they're running, and the goal is to catch them on the rise. Well, I have a Vizsla that'll flush off a verbal, and I was running him and two of my setters, and setters were on point. They found them, and the quail took off running, and hawk took off and pitched up and went into a hover, and all the quail stopped running. and I'm yelling free, which is the command for my VSLA to flush. And the quail got up while the bird was in a hover, and he folded his wings and just intercepted one midair. And his name's Mike McDermott. He was there watching, and Hannah Hayes was there watching, and everyone's just like screaming, happy. And that was the first quail that bird had caught in the air, and I was just like, yes, like finally. Not only did I do what I've been aiming to do, but I did it with witnesses and people that I wanted to show a bird that I was really proud of. And then this last year, my apprentice, he had raised a really nice goshawk, and he only had a cocker, he didn't have any point dogs. So he asked if I could go locate some quail for him. So we located some quail, and my dogs are on point with a split fine, like probably 50 yards apart, but facing each other. And you can see just both dogs drinking scent. And he walks in, and the whole covey gets up. The bird just plucked one right out of the covey on the rise. And I got it all on video. It's one of my favorite videos of all time. But it was cool because the same way I got one of my first midair catches on quail, my apprentice did. And it was kind of like passing the torch, like, here, now you're doing it. We're all doing the same thing now. So that was one of my favorite moments in falconry. I watch that video probably once a week. It's everything done right, from the dog work to the catch to falconry is kind of like an orchestra, and every day we try to play this song, and it doesn't always work, but when it does work and that song comes out perfect, you're reminded of why you're doing it. And like you guys had said earlier, it is art. Like you're trying to make moving art, and you get this mental picture in your head of how it's supposed to go, how it's supposed to look, and when it finally does go that way, it's just surreal. I love gun hunting. I've gun hunted my whole life, but I can't compare my best gun hunting moments to my best falconry moments. For me, it's just, there's so many moving parts. So when it finally happens, it's just like, you just got to sit there and take it in.
Yeah.
Very
And
cool.
that's the cool part. And Sean showed me some videos, so I'm overly excited to take the drive down there and watch how it all works. And maybe your apprentice can get one of them puppies that you got coming up. So Tyler and I have
That's the plan.
yeah, Tyler and I actually bred our females like days apart down to Sean Derrick's to Atlantic Way, and I'm excited for it. Hopefully we have puppies. I get X-rays next week, so
We love
ultrasound next
puppies.
week, so
We love
we
puppies.
need it. So, but that's a good way. You get him a hawk, now you got to get him a puppy, and hopefully that all goes well for you as well too. So,
Yeah.
but go ahead.
If you get a chance to see what Sean is doing, I've been watching falconry for the last 12 years. What Sean is doing down there in Georgia is, if you read a book, is defined as impossible. So just, if you get a chance to go see what Sean is doing, just know that only Sean is doing what Sean is doing. Like that, what he's doing with a goshawk down in South Georgia, people will be reading about years from now in disbelief. I mean, even falconers that are around right now, when I tell them what Sean is doing, they're like, no way. But they don't know Sean Derrick. So that dude doesn't know the word no.
I tried to get him talked into coming on the show, and he just looked at me and goes, I don't do social media. And I said, that's all I needed to know.
That's Sean.
That's Sean. But again, if somebody wants to learn more about you, you have Quail Hawk on your Instagram.
Yep.
We'll have all that website and everything posted on the comments below. On YouTube, there'll be some information on the Facebook page and Spotify and all this and stuff. So
He's got a real cool video up with Project Upland that kind of shows his bird and shows him in the early stages of training up his bird and raising it and that kind of thing. I think they did a really nice
Yeah.
job telling the
Will
story.
and AJ did an incredible job telling that story.
So I'd encourage people to check that out if they want to learn a little more about Tyler and his bird. But Hey, we appreciate your time. We appreciate you coming on the podcast, and keep doing what you're doing out there. It's amazing, it really is.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. If you ever find your way out here, you know where to find me. Just give me a call.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
sir.
think my truck will be pointed west here soon.
Yeah,
soon.
I think
I
we're
think
gonna have
that's,
to make a trip out there. But
yeah.
We've got 4 species of quail in a 3-hour radius. So
it doesn't make it any easier for us, does he?
I lost what
yeah,
he said, but I bet I kind of have a feeling that
four
what he said,
species of
so.
quail out there.
But everybody, we thanks
Yeah.
for joining us. We thank Tyler for taking the time. I think he's got a little guy that was promised a popsicle if he went and did something different while we were doing this. So we appreciate his patience too. And if you want to check out all his stuff, it'll be in the description. And don't forget to subscribe. We appreciate all the views. Hit the subscribe button. You can hit the little gold bell in the corner on your YouTube page, and that'll let you know every time we have a new episode or
sir.
something new. And it's
Yeah,
hot up here, so
yeah,
it's
it's
just
very
kind of
hot, but we'll keep adding some episodes. We got some good guests kind of in the wings that we're going to be having on and in the near future. So keep watching, and when you get a chance, take somebody hunting.
keep their nose in the wind.